Windows Forms applications. So in this nugget, we're going to look at how to build desktop applications. That's what a Windows form is. Think of a form as a screen. So we're going to create a Windows Forms project, add a bunch of forms into them, which is our screens, design our screens, put some code behind them, and then give it to the user to work with, right? So think of a Windows form application as just building a desktop application that runs on the user's local machine. And in this nugget, we're going to have a little fun and build a desktop application from scratch. So we'll design our form, put some code behind it, and make it work. All right. So let's take a brief look at the outline. We'll start with just that whole design process. First, I'll get you familiar with where to find these projects so we can add them into our Visual Studio solutions, and get familiar with adding forms into them, designing a form, getting familiar with how to drag controls on and put code behind them, and just generally have a little fun building a Windows form. We'll talk a little bit about visual inheritance. And we talked about inheritance when we were going through object-oriented programming, and saw that it's just a way for us to reuse code and classes. Well, the same thing in the desktop application world. If we have a bunch of screens that share common functionality, why not create a base form and then have all the forms that users are going to use? We can inherit from them, give them their own custom functionality, and we don't have to rebuild all that per form. We can reuse a lot of that functionality. So we'll look at visual inheritance. And at the end here, I want to get you familiar with MDI applications, which stand for Multiple Document Interface. And really, think of it as like building an Excel application, or a Word application, or even what we're in right here, Painter Classic. See this? This is an MDI application because I can have many of these mini screens inside of a hosting application. See that? So it's building something just like this. This is considered an MDI application. So we'll take a look at how to work with those as well. So with that, why don't we head over to Nugget Lab and get familiar with how to build Windows Forms applications. I'm going to minimize the whiteboard, head over to Nugget Lab here. And as soon as this fires up, let's just head down to the Start button and up to Visual C# 2010 Express, back to Visual C# Express here. And we're going to create a new project. And let's just choose the very first template. See, Windows Forms applications. This is going to be our project here. And let's just give this name 17-Windows Forms. There we go, Windows_Forms. And if we hit OK, that will give us our project inside of our solution. And we get a default form in here called form1.cs. So, and we've worked a little bit with these up to this point. So it's really just a matter, once you get your form on the screen, set some properties of the form here. And you can just click on the form to do that. Here's lots of properties. We can set the caption on it, and we can do things like decide what kind of border we want on it, if we want these boxes to show up for minimize, maximize. If we're building resize capabilities, we want to keep maximize enabled. If not, we can disable it. So little things like that. So with that said, let's head over to Nugget Lab and build a Windows Forms application. So let's minimize whiteboard, head over to Nugget Lab here. And as soon as Nugget Lab launches, let's head down to the Start button, up to Visual C# 2010 Express. And once we're in here, we're going to create a new project. So I'm going to click on the New Project link. Here's our Windows Form application project. And let's just call this 17-WinForms Apps. There we go. If we hit OK, that'll add the project, give us a solution for the project. And now it's just a matter of designing our application, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to build kind of a reminder application, something kind of neat that we can do, because I want to take this reminder application that's going to run in our desktop inside of our system tray, so we'll be able to add reminders that'll pop up and notify us throughout the day. So something pretty simple, but also something that we can evolve when we get into Windows Services, a future nugget that we can automate. All right, so kind of thinking ahead a little bit here, that we can just to give you some multiple uses here. But this is a cool little application, and again, here's something that we can evolve into further. So if we think about this for a minute, designing a front end really, and designing screens, really going to depend on the data, and try to model your screens based on your data. So if I were to think of a reminder application, what would I need to do? Well, I wouldn't have too much data, but I would still need to give the user the ability to work with reminders. Save a reminder, edit a reminder, delete a reminder, do things at the reminder level. So the reminder is sort of our data point. So when the user comes into our screen, if they've been using our application for a while, they need a way to find a reminder, click on it, and then get information about it if they want to edit it or whatnot. So let's just kind of create the shell of this initially. If we head over to the toolbox and pin this down, here are the tools we have to work with. Let me just minimize this a little bit. We don't need that much space. Here we go. And if we were to, the first thing I would think here, building just a shell, is we need a toolbar. We'd maybe need something for them to host reminders in, and then we need some details about the reminder. So let's just do something really simple here. Let's head down and first get a tool strip. So here's a tool strip. We put that right on. It's automatically going to default to the top, and you can start adding buttons up here like so. You can add separators to make them, group your buttons accordingly, according to functionality or whatnot. I love doing that. So, just like Visual Studio does up here, everything's kind of grouped accordingly. All your open and save functionality, cut, copy, paste, your undos and redos. So they're kind of separated by separator bars. And Visual Studio is a good example. As you're in here, just kind of look around. You can pick up some good design tips just looking around, see how Microsoft does it. And really, any application you use, it doesn't have to specifically be Visual Studio, but you'll pay more attention as you start designing these screens. You'll become both a critic and a student of applications out there. I know I've been using them forever, and I still, to this day, anytime I open up a new app, I'm kind of excited to see what the interface looks like, see if I can learn anything off it, or bash it if it's horrible. But at any rate, designing forms is definitely fun, and you get the hang of it pretty fast. It's pretty easy to do. But so we got a toolbar up here. Sorry to go off on a tangent there. And the next thing we want to do is just give users the ability to store and work with reminders. And I can think of a few things here. I can think of active reminders versus completed reminders. So reminders that are active haven't happened yet, and they're going to happen. So we need a way to separate that. So I'm going to use one of my favorite controls, and this is more of an advanced control. But I tell you, get the hang of it because it's really cool, easy to use, and once you do get the hang of it, super powerful. So this is a tree view control that acts just like Windows Explorer, where we have nodes that collapse and expand. In fact, if we right-click on our Start menu and hit Open Windows Explorer, this is a tree view right here. See this? We have nodes that are expandable and collapsible. And you can just keep going down here. Here's all of our projects, for instance. So it's a great way to view a lot of data hierarchically. So now we've got our tree view in place. This is where we'll plant our reminder data in here. Now we need a way, if they click on a reminder, to work with the details. Or if they want to add a new reminder, how do they do that? So that's what these buttons up here will do. We'll define these buttons in a little bit here. But let's just get kind of the details in here. All right, let's scroll up and find a group box first. So here's our group box. We'll just drag that onto our screen. Push it over here. We can size it accordingly here. And sometimes this happens. See how it's way off screen? If that happens, and you're working in a small space like myself where you can't access it, just go into the properties, find the size like this, and let's just do that, 100. There we go. Now we can work with it. So we'll pop that over here. Now we need some details in here. And actually, it's a good idea here to name your controls too, so we can work with them in code. See how we've got the default for everything? Tool strip button 1, tool strip button 2, tree view 1, group box 1. So it's a good idea to give these a name. I like to get everything on here first and then go through and name everything. That way I kind of keep the process going and everything kind of in one spot. But if we get this group box in here a little better, now we can start adding some controls into it. So let's get some labels on here. I'm just going to drag a label on here. I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to paste it a few times. 2, 3, and 4. Looks good. And now you can work with this kind of stuff too. If you highlight all of them, these are all, this whole second toolbar really is just for working with aligning your controls. See how that brought them together? Brought them together even more, started separating them. These are good to do this kind of stuff. Line up your left. See how this label 4 is off just a little bit? We could line this up. Where's our line up here? It's over here. Here they go. Align lefts. See that? There it is. So these are your lines. These are your spacings. So, I still like to do it by hand. Just kind of grab them and hit your arrow keys if you want that precision. But these are good for doing what I just did here, just to make sure everything's lined up accordingly. Whichever one's white, they're going to line up to. But that's all little stuff you'll pick up along the way. But okay, so we got some labels in here. Let's get some other things in here. First thing I can think of with a reminder, we'd need them to name the reminder, right? And that's how it'll show up in our tree view over here. So let's get a text box, which is perfect for entering data, allowing the user to enter some data here. So we got a text box here. There we go. There's our actual name of the reminder. The next thing we need is a date or a time that the reminder should happen. All right, so let's get a date time picker on here. If we scroll up, there's our date time picker. So we'll put that right there. Once again here, let's just modify the width a little bit so we can work with it. There we go. Now, another thing we want to do is remind them prior to this date and time. How many minutes ahead of this will we allow them to, or set the reminder off in their desktop to give them the reminder? Well, let's for that, for minutes, let's do what's called a domain up-down. So if we scroll here, here's a domain up-down, which just allows the user to basically just tab through or hit these little arrow keys here to go up and down through numbers. All right, so we've got that set up. And the last thing, how about just maybe a description? So we could use another text box. All right, where's another text box? There you are. Drag that on. And now this one may have a little more data than just a one-liner like our name up here. So what we can do is there's a property we can set called multi-line. There it is. If we double-click this, it'll turn it to true. And now we can expand our description out a little more. And there we go. So we've kind of got the basic setup. Now would be a good time to align everything here on both sides. Give it some names, and maybe define what our buttons and our actions are going to be inside of here. Obviously, we need an add new, a save, maybe mark a reminder as completed, just some things of that nature. So that's kind of the quick and dirty way of building a Windows form. And really, it's just a matter of using your controls, getting familiar with all these controls. The more controls you understand and know how to work with and use, the more dynamic and interesting interfaces you're going to be able to use, because your tool set's a lot bigger. But I tell you, designing these things is really just a matter of analyzing your data, and again, analyzing the requirements of what you're building for, and you'll get a good idea. I mean, if you're building an application that has tons of data behind it, a tree view is probably not going to be a good idea because it'll take forever to load the tree view. You may instead need like a search engine on top of it that'll give you a nice list through a list view or a list box or something. But in general, just look at your data. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this the rest of the way. And what I have here, I'm going to just show all files in our project. I created a reminder form. And I'm just going to right-click on this, choose Include in Project. Right-click on our classes, choose Include in Project. And I also have a bunch of images here. I'll include this in Project as well. So I added these into our project. I'm going to hide our toolbox. And let's just open our reminder form. So here's what I was aiming for. Hey, not too bad, right? Kind of close. But here's our toolbar with our defined buttons. Here's our tree view. We've got an active node and a completed node. And then here's all of our details. And then also we have an exit button here to get out of the application. And by the way, this area down here is kind of our hidden area. Really, this is for things that don't really have an interface. So think of them as kind of your component tray, really, because things like this TM alerts. This is a timer. This is a timer that's going to run every few seconds to analyze all of our active reminders and do a date comparison. If the minute's within the time frame of the due date, then it's going to pop up in a little balloon in our system tray and give us that reminder. So this is kind of just your component tray down here. So here's our reminder. This is called a notification icon. And if you look in the toolbox into the ends here it is, notify icon. And this just basically allows you to create a system tray application, something that runs down here, just like we have here. We have this Visual Studio Customer Experience Improvement Program, which you'll always be dealing with when you install Visual Studio. Well, this is always down here, unless you double-click on it and say, sure, I'd like to participate. now it went away. So that was a notify icon, and that's really exactly what we're incorporating into our demo application here. And, just to run through some of the other controls down here, and just to get you up to speed on what all the controls are in here. We've got the notification icon, as I mentioned, our timer, as I mentioned. We've got this tree view images. This is just considered an image list. So an image list in the toolbox here starts with an I. If we go to the eyes, there's an image list. So basically, it's pretty simple. I just added some of the images that are in here. So I've got all the images in the application in here. Images for the toolbar, which tie directly to the toolbar. They have an image property on the actual button. So that's really easy. Just choose your image. But the tree view is a special beast because you can't just tie images to it. So that's why you need an image list. So I've got inside of here, if we open this, just hit the little button above it here, the arrow, and hit choose images. I've added closed folder, open folder, reminder. So it's a closed folder now. When it gets expanded, it turns into an open folder. And the reminders themselves will have this little alarm clock icon that we have as the actual application icon. All right, so once that's in place, all you need to do in your tree view is there's a property we can find in here called image list. So we just tied this image list to it, and there you go. There's also, we have a menu system here, but this is actually a context menu script, which basically means when you right-click on something, those are your context menus. So what do we tie this to? Well, we tied it to our notify icon. As you can see, it's going to have a context menu store property that we tied to this menu. So if someone right-clicks on our icon down here in the tray, this is the menu they'll get. Show, stop reminding me, and exit. So we've got a global turn-off here, so we can stop annoying them about the reminders. And the last thing we have in our tray down here is just our toolbar, because the toolbar itself here sits down in the tray, even though it's up here, and we can work with all the items in the toolbar itself. So to go over just some of these buttons here, we've got a new button, which just resets the current class that we're working with, the reminder class here, and that'll also then allow us to basically work with a new reminder, set up a new reminder, which we can then save. And that's all this button will do, is save the current reminder here, and then add it into the tree view, and then that'll allow it to basically work within the timer. So every time the timer goes through its rotations, it'll add that reminder into it, do its date comparison, and again, if the alert falls within the time frame, then it will show up to the user there. We've also got a remove if we want to allow them to delete one. And then we've got one that's complete, so we can mark it as completed, and we can also enable or disable them. So just some simple buttons up here to control how reminders work and function. Now looking at the reminder class itself, if I open it up, it's very simple. See that? We've got just a name, a due date, alert time, notes, is complete, and is enabled. All the things that we can work with in the form and that we'll need to work with on our toolbar and inside of our tree view here, inside of the class. So everything that we need to track. Alright, now let's go over some code here, just to show you how to work with Windows Forms code. A lot of things is pretty straightforward. They just have events tied to them like anything else here. If you click on a button, for instance, that'll raise the click event, so the code behind the click event will run. And if I double click on our BTN new here, that'll take us right into the click event for our new button. And just kind of the basic structure of this application, I kept it really simple here, and I did everything manual, just so you can see that. And what I mean by that is a lot of people these days use data binding. And data binding is just a way that we can hook our classes and the properties and fields in them directly to interface items, so we don't have to write all the code to clear them out every time. You know, if we clear out our object, then it'll automatically clear out all this because it's data bound to the control itself. So I'm going to keep things, again, I'm going to kind of stay away from those advanced concepts and just do it all manually. So, you know, filling up our controls manually by extracting them out of the class. So it's good to know all this stuff, so when you get into data binding, it'll just kind of all click together. So back into our form here, we've got, at the top, we've got a list of reminders that we're going to maintain. So as long as the application is running, anytime the user saves a reminder, if it's new, it'll get added into the list. If it exists, it'll just find that reminder and update it. And then we've got the current reminder that they're always working with as the current reminder. So these are only form level variables that we have to work with. And then down here we have, scroll back down to our add reminders here. In fact, if you have a tough time finding it, you can drop down your combo box up here, which gives us all of the routines in here. Alright, but I found it. It's right here. And so when they click on new, we just set the current reminder equal to a brand new reminder. So we're just creating a new reminder object to work with. And then we unload the reminder controls in case they're already filled. And then we enable them in case they're disabled. So that's all there's to it. And saving it here just does a validate. So I've got a little validation routine just to make sure they have the name set in there and all that good stuff. Set the due date, set the alert time, which we convert to an integer based on the value inside of the numeric up and down control there. And then our notes. So again, this is that manual part I was telling about. And this is what data binding, you wouldn't have to do all this because you'd set up data binding to your class and it would just be there. But in this case, we're doing it nice and manual here, so you can see we're just going through each property and tying it to the value on the form. So that's how we can fill up our classes with data, is just extract them from what the user puts in to these controls. So when they hit the save button, all the data is going to come out of these controls, go into our class, and then that's pretty much all there is to it. And then again here, and then we need to add it to our list of reminders and then load the reminders tree. So this is what it will actually, in fact, if we just double click on this, right click, and then hit go to definition, that'll take us to our load reminders tree. And this is what actually fills the tree view. This is the only code that really works with the tree view here, is we just clear the nodes, we create our active root and our complete root with our names there. In fact, we can even change this from complete to completed. And then we just loop through all the reminders in our global reminders variable and add them to the tree node with the appropriate image. If it's complete here, we add it to the complete root node. If it's not complete, we add it to the active root node, and that's it. And then we just expand the active root node, and we're done. So I'll let you go through a lot of this code. Again, I kept it really simple. There's really not a lot to the code, and there's really not a lot of code in here to make this entire application run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go into program.cs, make sure our reminder form is our startup form, and it is. So let's hit start. Everything looks good here. And here we go. We've got our My Daily Reminders application. Let's hit the new reminder, which will create us a new reminder object, light up our controls to work with. And let's just give this, how about the reminder name of do work? Let's remind us 1 minute before, how about 3:27? And you know what? Before I save this, actually let me save this now. So actually, let's put a little note in here first. Yeehaw! Alright, something like that. So we'll hit save. Alright, we've got our do work reminder saved. And let's get the time out here so we can see when a minute before 3:27 is, which is going to be 3:26 and some change. So I'm going to right click, go to properties on the toolbar, or the taskbar down here. Go to customize, turn system icons on and off, turn that clock on, hit OK, and we should, depending on when I saved that, we should get a notification here shortly at 3:26 at some point, as long as it's before 3:27, right? Hey, there it is. Look at that. So there's our reminder. Do work is due in 1 minute. So there it is. Hey, it worked, right? So that's pretty cool. Now what we could do is we could mark this as complete because it's done. We could auto do it based on that if they accept the notification. There's a ton of things we could do with this application to make it, full of features and functionality. I'll leave that up to you. If you want to expand on this, go to town, have fun, because there's a lot you could do with this. But if I click on this, hit mark as completed, I'm going to say, yep, it's done, and now it's going to move it into the completed folder, which we collapse because we don't expand it like we do the active folder. So there you go. Kind of cool, huh? And by the way, if we wanted to edit that, we could just, if you click on these nodes, it grays everything out and empties the controls. So if we click on it, brings it back to life so we can edit it and work with it. So that's that. Play around with this. Play around with the code. Play around with the interface. This will give you a good starting point here for Windows Forms and desktop applications if you're not familiar with them. And even if you are, it shows you kind of some cool things to do here with the notification icon. That's always fun to do. People love tray applications and things that you can do down here in the tray to work with applications. I personally love building applications that run on the tray. They're fun. And my tray is like out to here now on my work computer just because I love building applications that do that. So that's it. There's just a brief look at how you can design and work with a Windows desktop application. Let's move into visual inheritance. Let me show you some other things you can do here as far as working and designing Windows Forms. So let's say that we wanted to build a new form based on this form. Well, what we can do here, and in fact, let's just take our form one that we were working with. Actually, let's add a new one. I'll show you how to add a new one in here. If we right-click on our solution, go to Add, Windows Form, kind of the default there since we're in a Windows Form project, and I'm just going to call this Visual Inheritance. There we go. Hit Add. So we've got our visual inheritance in here. So the only thing we want to do is if we want this visual inheritance form to gain all the functionality of our reminder form, then all we need to do is go into the code behind and change this from the base form. See this? Everything by default inherits from the base form, which is why we get that big blank rectangle like we have now with this. There's your base form. We're going to change this to the reminder form and hit save. So now, check this out. See that? Pretty cool, right? We've get everything that the reminder form has, only we've got this little blue drop down. And what this basically means is it's locked. We can't do anything with these because they're inherited and they're members of that form that we can't override. And now we could design our form to maybe make these so they don't show up or they're overridable so the user can delete them, and then we can make certain parts of our form locked like this so they can't change them, or we can't change them if we're the ones that are doing this. So if we wanted to control that functionality and control to give the user and allow them to change any of these controls or work with them other than just setting basic properties on them, then what we can do is go to our base form, which in this case is a reminder form. Let's just highlight a few of these here. And if we scroll down to the properties for all of these, there's a modifiers property. By default, they're all private, which, if you think about back to object-oriented programming, if it's private, nothing can access them, right? The only thing that can access them is the class itself. So if we drop this down to public. And now it's going to give you a little warning here that we must rebuild our project for the changes. Then so if we want all these to truly become public, we'll just right click, choose rebuild. There we go, everything looks good on the rebuild. And now back on our visual inheritance form, see these light up? Now we can do whatever we want with these. We've got full access to the controls themselves. Now the next thing I want to take you through here, closing out of our visual inheritance form here, I just want to take you through MDI applications, how to build a multiple document interface application. And again, it's a lot like a Word application or Excel or even Visual Studio. This is an MDI application where we have this main toolbar here that, and these buttons are global. They apply to whatever screen is currently active. Of course, the save all applies to everything. But you kind of have a global toolbar, and then you've got this little workspace down here with each window independently. And in fact, you can drag these windows out. You can see these are just, extra screens in the workspace, in our workspace. So this is kind of what we're going to build, something like this, a multiple document style interface. And if I just put my stuff back here, there we go. That's what we're going to do with our reminder. So we can break our toolbar out into our MDI parent, as we call it, our hosting window. And we can even break the tree view out into that hosting window. So we can just, anytime the user opens up a reminder, if they have multiple reminders, they'll have a window per reminder. So they can have tons of reminders open and work with them all at one time rather than one by one inside of one screen. So to add an MDI parent into our form here and work with an MDI application, let's just right click on our project, go to add, new item, and down here we have an MDI parent form at the very bottom here. You can see I scrolled down a little bit. At the very bottom, MDI parent form. So let's just name this MDI reminder, let's call it host, MDI reminder host. And we'll hit add, and what's neat about this is it kind of sets it up for us already. So it gives us everything that we need menu-wise. Kind of neat that we've got a toolbar up here, we've got a status bar down there, we've got some tools in here. So we've got all this window functionality in it for us. So it just kind of sets us up with a nice shell that we just really just need to write some code behind. But I'm actually going to ditch this toolbar. We're going to add our own in here. And then just to show you down here, we've got our status bar as well. But one interesting thing about this MDI host is it's really just a form with one property in it. In fact, if we scroll over here, there's a property called isMDIContainer, and it just came in with true. So if we turn this to false, look at that, all that gray area, it's just your regular old Windows form now with a menu and a status bar. I mean, nothing special, right? So this is what makes it an MDI parent, or container as they call it, because now when we show forms, we can tie them as children to this form, and they'll show up inside of this gray area, inside of this workspace. So the next thing we do is work with some children, so we can load them inside of here. And also I want to get our toolbar up here, that our reminder toolbar, and maybe even put our tree view over here on the left hand side. So what I'm going to do, rather than hack this form up, because I'd like you to be able to use it and work with it, I'm going to copy it. I'll close out of this, and I'm going to right click in here, and I'm going to paste this, and we're just going to call this our MDI reminder form. So this is going to be our child reminder form. So we've got our host and then our form. Host is our container, form is our child. And now what I want to do here is just kind of turn this into a true MDI child. The first thing I'm going to do is just right click on this and choose cut. Alright, I'm going to get it out of there. And now I'm going to go over to our host and I'm going to paste it in there. So now we've got our toolbar inside of there. And the next thing then inside of our form is I want that tree view over there. So I'm going to cut this tree view out of here, go into our host, paste it in here, and then I always want it to dock to the left. So I'm going to go to the docking property. Where are you, dock? I saw it. Oh, there it is. And hit it left. Check it out. So it looks something like this. Cool already, right? It looks pretty neat. Now really the only other thing we need to do is clean up this form a bit. We can even take exit out of here. We could turn this into a close, and instead of exiting the entire application, it could just close this form. But let's just do this. Let's just keep this as just a really small reminder form, something like this. Keep it simple. And then and there's a lot of things we could do at this point to really MDI it, such as maybe put the name of the reminder up here in the title bar when they click on it, rather than have this static My Daily Reminders up here. Something as simple as that. But I'm just going to save this. And now over in our MDI host form, the only code we really need to change is when we create a new one, we're going to need to launch this new form. Alright, so if we double click on our new button here we go. And by the way, we need to do this because copying that toolbar over, we did not get all the code. So really we just need to copy all that code into this form, our new host form, and then maybe just modify certain areas so it works globally with all of our forms. All right, so just to show you how to actually call that form so it shows up inside of the MDI parent, that's what I'm going to do right now. And we can just simply create a form here. Let's just call this, it's going to be a MDI reminder form. And we'll just call this our child form equals a new MDI reminder form, like so. Now we can just do child form dot MDI parent equals this. And then finally here we can just do a child form dot show, like so. That should do it. And now obviously we need to get all of our current reminder stuff in here, but just to show you how this works, that should be all set up. And just to check on our program here, our main startup form is now MDI reminder host. So if we hit run, there it is. And if we hit new, and new again, and new again, and new again, and new again, see that? Pretty cool, right? Now we've got these in here. And by the way, this actually did all this code by adding the MDI parent here is written for us. So it's kind of neat that all this functionality comes, fresh into this form for us. We don't have to write all this code. The only code I did have to change other than that was just the name of this toolbar underneath this button right here, so we could show and hide the toolbar. And then obviously the status bar will still work. So the only other things we need to do then is just write some code to make sure the tree view works with the data inside of these forms, and then just to make sure to port all of our code behind these toolbar buttons over. But again, that'd be a good one for you to try out here. So I'll leave this the way it is, and pretty cool. See how minimal effort it took here just to get an MDI application up and running. It's really really simple to do. It's really just a matter of designing your forms first of all, and then the second part is when you call your child forms, you just have to set the MDI parent property on them to this, which and then launches the form inside of the parent. Alright, so in this CBC Nugget, we took a look at Windows Forms applications. And really, I just wanted to have a little fun and get you familiar with the process of building a desktop application, getting you familiar with how to design a form, drag some controls on, set some properties, write some code behind the controls, and then again, just kind of take it next level by showing you what a finished version of that would look like, and then kind of turning that into a multiple document interface application that allows you to create a host form or a container form that has child forms that work inside of the workspace. And we also took a brief look here at visual inheritance to see how you could reuse your screens. I hope this has been informative for you, and I thank you for viewing.